oh, that's the guy that left. He sold his soul to the devil. Like, I lived an entire life. I was almost 30 when I made the decision to leave. If I'm choosing this, I'm actually choosing, at least calling bluff on going to hell and damning my soul for eternity. And then there's the very real human social aspect that 99% of the people I grew up with and knew and associated with became estranged overnight. Immediately post that decision was the most difficult period of my existence on this planet. I'm saying that this is better than what my dad, what my grandfather, what this whole organization is saying is the right way to live. Like, who am I? I flew in from New York because my dad was close to passing. He was on hospice at home. I got given a phone call saying, it's close, you're going to want to get here. My dad and I have developed a good relationship in the last 2 years leading up, and I speed there. I go in the room where my dad is, and my brothers forced me out. So I wasn't actually there when he passed. Well, why didn't I stop it? Why didn't I go in there? And here's the hard thing to admit to myself.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and find healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you'd like to join us over on YouTube, that would be awesome. Head on over to Cults to Consciousness, where you can join in on the conversation. Like, subscribe, all the YouTube-y things, but really it means so much more than that to us. You are becoming an advocate for these people who are coming on and sharing their stories, telling us that you care, telling the algorithm to boost it to more people. So we really appreciate any way that you can engage in the post. We just started another sister channel, if you guys are not aware, Cults to Consciousness Clips, where if you're like, hey, I just want to see a couple of tidbits from here and there, at Cults to Consciousness Clips, we have a link in our homepage. It's awesome. And we thought it would be a good way to bring up some of the older episodes that maybe people didn't see or they weren't aware of that existed. So we're just going to be throwing up some like 10-minute videos over there. So today's guest, he's been on before and he came to our meetup in Salt Lake City. So for anyone who joined us there, thank you so much. We loved meeting you guys. We're going to do more around other cities if we can. He came and gave us some updates on his life and we were like, hey, we need to record again. He's in LA, so we're actually in studio. Thank you so much for joining us, Calvin Wayman.
So good to be here. Good to be back in LA. It's a little bit muggy in New York City, so it feels good to it was like 69 this morning going out to the beach. So yeah, it feels good to be in LA weather.
Yeah, I mean, LA is great. Yeah. The reason we're doing this part 2 is to talk about the sacrifice.
Part 3, actually.
Oh, you're right. We did
3.
2 episodes and now this is the 3rd.
Yeah.
To talk about the sacrifice of losing your family, losing your community, losing your religion, losing your kids in some way, shape, and form. We'll get into that. Yep. And what it looks like when you get to the other side of living in the world, right, where you are one with the evil people according to your religion, what that does to you mentally, what it looks like physically being shunned and ostracized, and how that has affected you just overall. A little bit of a recap of your story. I'm going to do the best I can, and then you're going to fill in some of the holes. For those of you who have not seen the first episode, don't feel like you have to stop and go back and watch the first one, but you can if you would like additional context. So Calvin is from the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not specifically the FLDS from the Warren Jeffs sect. However, it used to be until there was a split, and they went over and became the Work versus the FLDS led by Warren Jeffs, but it's all from the same group. You were mentioning that Warren Jeffs was...
My dad grew up with him, one generation before. The Work and Warren Jeffs group was all the same church, like headquartered in like the southern Utah, Hilldale area, northern Arizona area. That's where I'm from. One dad, 4 moms. And if they didn't see the episode, 44 siblings, all in one house.
Wild.
Yeah.
So, and you grew up in Salt Lake, not at Short Creek.
So the headquarters was down in the Colorado City area, specifically called Centennial Park, or the Centennial Park Group, if people want to search it, or the Work on Google. But I grew up in Riverton on a farm, like a fenced yard farm, just a suburb of Salt Lake City.
For people who aren't familiar with the whole Mormon sphere, we've talked about this before, but this is not the mainstream LDS church, not the ones who come and knock on your door in the little missionary outfits and everything. This is a branch from a long time ago when they stopped practicing polygamy, and other groups decided to continue the law of polygamy according to Joseph Smith. So they're following the fundamentalist teachings of the LDS Church, of the original LDS Church.
Might I add,
Yes.
because I've just been getting so many comments on this on my podcast, is that, but also recognizing the undeniable connection between LDS and FLDS.
Well, yeah.
Because, yes, there's so many people that think they're just completely separate.
That's not the case.
And especially if you're LDS member, they're like, they'll be commenting on people's YouTube like, we're not the same. Once upon a time, they would have been one of the same. The only reason FLDS or fundamentalist Mormonism exists is because the LDS Church said this is the way you have to live to get to the celestial kingdom, and then they changed.
Yeah.
And it was in the change and then excommunicating their own members for living the same doctrine that they taught them they had to live to get to the celestial kingdom. That's where the change happened.
Yes.
So there's just this undeniable connection of fundamentalism that's connected to the LDS Church that I think is like this early, I think it's worth like highlighting. They deserve to know that there's that connection.
And I think that's important, having grown up in the mainstream LDS Church and being like, what? Those aren't even Mormons. Like, they can't even use that word. Yes, they can. Mormonism is a very big blanket term for hundreds of sects of Mormonism.
We called ourselves Mormons. We called ourselves the real Mormons. We were the real ones. Yeah.
And I would have said, no, you're wrong. I'm the real Mormon.
Yeah. You changed your garments. We kept the long garments and everything.
Yeah.
We get to have the temples when Jesus comes and sets everything in order. We get to have the temples back. Like
wow,
it was.
Wow, you're even trying to swipe the temples from them?
They're really ours. We're just letting you guys have them for now.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting place to start, because so many times we get that in the comments too of like, why don't you make the distinction? I always do. And everyone who's watched the channel before is like, oh, Shalise, I'm so tired of your disclaimers, but I always have to give them. Yeah. And it's important because you are following the fundamental principles of the original 100%. Religion. And that's something that I've learned too through all these interviews, interviewing multiple people from different fundamentalist sects, is that when people get mad and say, oh, those are just the extremists, those are just the fundamentalists, I'm like, well, they're actually following the religion more closely than you are. So why are you getting upset that they're just trying to do their best at the original version of the religion? And to me, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but I always think to myself, if you're not going to be fundamentalist, what's the point? Because you're living like a whitewashed version of it, you know, a diluted version.
You're speaking the way
the one true church, right?
That's literally how I was raised. We had those viewpoints, so I actually get it. Like, and I've heard that from a lot of ex-Mormons as they've left. They're like, in a strange way, we have respect for fundamentalist Mormons because they've stuck to their guns. And I've strangely, even though of course I've left it, don't associate with it. I view it as culty and all those things, but there is parts of it. I get it, why you continue to live this way. Like, I have some level of respect for people that have sacrificed to stick to living what they were told.
Yeah.
Even though it was misguided and I don't think it's true, there's something that I have a human appreciation for, of people that stick to what they believe or what they or at least taught is the right way to live.
So let's talk about that sacrifice. Just give, if you can, just a few examples of how your life was different when you were involved, so that we can really understand fully what you had to leave.
Everybody that I knew, all the way up until my mid-20s, 99% of the people that I knew had the last name Wayman, my same last name.
And you were related?
Yes.
Okay.
So, because Waymans lived away from 4 hours away from the main headquartered church. And so we mostly associated with each other. My entire social circle in the decision to leave, became estranged overnight. I started to meet other people of the work and stuff like that, especially after getting married and all that sort of thing, with an arranged marriage that I'm no longer in. The reason it was so challenging to leave on multiple levels, but on a quote unquote spiritual level, was in Mormonism, you're taught that you're not just judged based on the actions you take, you're judged based on the truth that you were given and then how you
turned
act.
Against.
Yes.
We had the same thing.
Yes. That's my point.
You had the truth.
Yes.
Which means you were even more of a devil for leaving.
Totally.
Because you had it and you threw it away. You denied the Holy Spirit.
And if you're going to do that as a guy, you're going to be a son of perdition. It's worse than murder. So I had to grapple with that. If I'm choosing this, I'm actually choosing, or at least calling bluff on going to hell and damning my soul for eternity. There's that. And then there's the very real human social aspect that 99% of the people I grew up with and knew and associated with became estranged overnight.
Yeah.
So immediately post that decision was the most difficult period of my existence on this planet. People talk about all the time in other conversations I have privately when they first learn about where I've come from is, oh, that must have been very hard to grow up in what I would call a cult. That wasn't the traumatic part, though. Because when you're in it, when that's all you know, it's your normal. Yeah. It's your normal. And so there's nothing that's really, I'll speak for me, like that wasn't the traumatizing part, even though there were things about it that were hard and as I've gone through therapy found traumatizing. But the thing that was truly traumatizing was the adult trauma, not the child trauma, but the adult trauma of leaving. Because it's breaking down years of programming and conditioning. And you can't just throw it all away. That would probably break you even more as a human. You have to turn into this detective in a way of like, what was BS and what is actually something that I want to hold on to just in your worldview of life. That was the hardest part. The immediate aftermath. And then of course, COVID happened. And so I've never been more alone than in that period immediately after the first couple of years. I forget
how soon this was. I mean, it wasn't that long ago.
6 years ago.
Right.
So I lived an entire life. I was almost 30 when I made the decision to leave. And it's why I also love California, Southern California, because this was where the lid blew wide open for me. Because I was living in Utah. I was already starting to question a little bit because of college, but then I quit my 9-to-5 day job and I came out to California to do a solar company, doing door to door. That is what put me in a different environment for the first time, which made me
outside the Utah bubble.
Yes. And I wonder if you relate to this because you grew up in Utah, right?
Sure did.
Doesn't it feel like a different planet?
Oh my gosh,
it's not just a different state. It's not like I'm in Utah and over there's California. When I moved out here, it felt like I went to a different planet. Even Mormons were different. I hung out with some Mormons here in LA. They're not the same as Utah Mormons. And so there was just something about that really kicked things off. But yeah, LA, moving into Southern California, that's what led me to finally leave. When I left, I had actually moved back from LA and I was now near the headquarters. I was near Colorado City in Centennial Park when I decided to leave. So when I decided to leave, I was within the walls of this, castle of fundamentalist Mormonism. So everybody around me knew that I wasn't in it anymore. So if I bumped into them in the grocery store, it was like cold shoulder shunning, like either not talking or bashing me, or I'm hearing rumors about, oh, that's the guy that left. He sold his soul to the devil. And I still get comments like that. I went back home since our episode, our last 2 episodes. I went back home. So I saw old familiar faces I hadn't seen for a while. And then I noticed when I got back from New York, I started to get more social media trash and hate. In fact, I had siblings that reached out to me, was like, is this you making these comments? And I was like, what are you talking about? I had several screenshots. Somebody from the town had created a fake Calvin Wayman profile and started posting stuff to my family's pages pretending it was me.
What?
And at first it was like, what are you doing? But then I've started to regulate myself differently and be like, you know what? How bored do you have to be that you're going to go create you're going to create a whole page pretending to be somebody else for what? So it's been a journey. It's been a journey.
So I feel like to get some context into your family, we need to understand your marriage and your kids and where that kind of left you when you spoke up and you're like, hey, I don't believe this anymore. How did that go down?
So I had an arranged marriage, so church assigned, and we got along. But when I came to that realization that I did not want to be a part of this, that put a big question mark on us. ultimately, after hundreds of conversations that we had together, it was obvious that we wanted very different things. I wanted to continue to explore the world, have a variety of life experiences. She wanted the exact opposite. She wanted to stay, and like, she had already explored a bit. She lived out in California. She's like, I've had enough adventure for a lifetime. This is what I want. I want to be a part of this. And so she decided to stay in the religion. And so she stayed. She's actually already remarried and everything else. She's a sister wife.
I was going to ask.
Yeah. It's a very unique situation. I don't know if I would want it any different, because I've seen other people that have had divorces, and there was definitely, it's challenging to uncouple from any sort of relationship, but we still get along. And I mean, you've met my kids today and stuff like that. So they spend time with me when I travel or out in New York as well as there. And as a dad, of course, there was a lot of questions like, how do I want my kids to be raised? And the thing I came to that gives me a lot of peace, and I'm actually really excited about, is humans learn really well through contrast. And so they get to spend time there, and they also get to spend time in LA or in Phoenix or in Manhattan or in Montana, wherever we do things when they're spending time with me. Yeah, so that's where it's at now. Like, it's getting to this place where we're just like, okay, you're living your life respectfully. You're living your life respectfully. We're on different paths, but we have this common thing that binds us together, which is our kids. We just had a birthday party for my daughter a couple of days ago down there, and it was great.
So that's something that I think we could address, because I did notice some people in the comments saying, how dare he just leave his kids and all this. And I'm thinking, I can understand that perspective, but on the other hand, you staying in a religion that would make you unhappy is also not doing them a service, because like you just said, if you want to give them the chance at a different lifestyle, you can't be in it. You can't say,
I so appreciate you saying that.
Do this, don't do what I'm doing. And they'll be like, well, why? You know, you have to show them, I stepped out, you can step out if they want to.
Yes, if they want to.
Yes.
Those comments are speaking to the deepest insecurity that I had when I left. Like, what is that doing for them? Is it good for them? Should I be near them? And that's what I came to, is like, I have to take a broadened view of this. What am I going to do? This is a conversation I had to myself and journaled about a lot. What am I going to do? Just be there. And then, as you just said, once they're 18, say, go out, do your thing. Or
lead by example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We stay connected. We talk every day. They have a watch phone. They can call me. So we're tight. We're connected. I have the closest relationship I've had with them ever. I am an option out if that's what they're choosing now.
Yeah, they know that you're a safe place.
Yes. And I already have my son having ideas of like, I wonder what it would be like to do a year of school in New York City at some point. And I'm like, that's a really cool idea, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's the one thing I've had to come to too, is not putting so much pressure on myself, that there is no manual for this. Like, I don't know anybody else that, grew up in an arranged marriage, fundamentalist Mormon thing, and then they tried to live their own life. I don't know what path to follow. The only thing I'm trying to do is like, what's the best thing for my kids? What's the best thing for me? And one of the ways, the bridges I've come to, is something you just said, is the very, very best thing that I believe I can give my kids, in addition to an example, in addition to a way out, is a whole happy dad.
Yeah.
And so I'm really trying to focus on that, of like, what's good for my own mental health, my own strength, because if I do that, then I can fully show up to them, be fully present with them. And it may not look exactly as somebody else would want or predict, but hey, I got to do the best thing that I know how to do. And that's what I'm doing.
And I just wanted to address that too, because it's not like you said, bye kids, and then you're no longer in their lives.
No.
You are still actively participating. And how, I know it's hard and maybe you shouldn't speak for your ex-wife, but I'm wondering how she feels about them going out into the world and experiencing the sinful things.
I think she's open to it.
Okay.
Yeah. The one thing that we are very aligned on, because she saw with me, she was raised very differently, even though she grew up in the same religion as me. My family was raised more Warren Jess-esque, like more controlling than her family.
Oh.
Her family was way more open, liberal, still to this day. Like if there is a political spectrum within fundamentalist Mormonism, I was super right wing, she was super left wing as a family.
Yeah.
Like they were way more open-minded with things like that. So she already somewhat resented the way I was controlled in my upbringing.
Okay.
She does not want that for the kids.
Okay.
We are totally on the same page that they get to choose. Now, we, of course, vary on what's a good belief system. We vary on if Joseph Smith was actually a prophet or a con man. We vary on all those things. But the one thing we're aligned on is individuals need to choose their individual path. And we're going to do our best to support them, give them emotional love. Like the thing we also just know, in addition to giving them a whole happy parent, is just flood them with love, surround them with love. They have a lot of love in their family now. They have love for me. They have love from my siblings that are out that I've stayed connected with. Ultimately, when it comes time, they get to decide. And we always do little things to develop that choice. Like just, we try to always give them the ability to recognize, no, you can choose. What do you want to do here? And let them come to it themselves. Because if they feel like that they were compelled on my side or her side, that's not good for them. They're going to end up rebelling anyway, as clearly I've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when these worlds collide, because she seems great and understanding and allows you to take the kids all over the United States or whatever. But what happens when both worlds have to come together? Is she forced to also shun you in those social situations? And how do you think that affects the kids watching?
It's strange. I don't know. Because that definitely happens. It definitely happens where I don't always feel welcomed. And so we have a schedule of when I have the kids, when she has the kids, especially around holidays and birthdays and that sort of thing. And like this year, my daughter, it was her time to have my daughter for the birthday. She just assumed that I wasn't going to be there. And there was like a conversation that we had to have there. And I was like, we've always been there. Like, that's the thing that the kids get to have is they get to have both of us on their birthday. And at first she didn't want me to. Because I'm not sure why. But over time, it became, she came to the idea of like, yeah, that's actually better for her. So it's still water to be navigated. I don't know the clear answer with everything. We're just trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah.
And, I do my best to both be honest with what I believe in and also respect their mom for the choices that they're making, for the life that they're in. And then, hopefully through feeling love all around, they recognize when they're older that people are trying to do the best they can. And now I get to choose for myself of what do I want.
Yeah. So you have a beautiful little girl. Are you worried that she may be forced into polygamy in an arranged marriage like you were?
This is strange, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know if this is being overly optimistic. I don't see it happening.
Okay.
I don't see it happening.
Why is that?
Because she's too independent already, in a good way.
Okay.
Yeah. And the work also is already, there's signs of it being less and less arranged. Like a lot can change. My daughter is 7, so in 11 years, like a lot can change in 11 years. If I have any say, the thing I'm going to do, like the reason I wrote her a children's book called Mistakes Are A-OK, Maggie May, and dedicated it to her for her birthday a couple years ago. And what I am trying to instill in her and in my son is this idea that they are in charge of their life. They can make mistakes. That's okay. And you can still keep on learning and growing. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do. I'm going to continue to empower her, make her realize that she can try things. Right now, she's so vibrant and not just energetic, but she is so independent and willful. And if she continues that, then I think she's going to choose a life that she feels great about. I don't see, right now, I do not see her or my son going into something that they don't want, because they are getting clear contrast of that world and this world, and they have examples of parents that are doing what they want.
So here's the tricky thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that regardless of your example of doing the opposite, do you think that because she is still in that environment, she may think that she wants the polygamous lifestyle because of the way that she's being indoctrinated to see it?
Totally.
So that's where
that's getting a little bit more
tricky,
conspiratorial, because
right?
I can't speak for her, but I totally think that. I think because I know what it felt like to leave, and I know how challenging it was to question my own worldviews and everything.
Yeah.
And I do think, if I'm talking about her, that is just her comfort, which is somewhat scary. And in a strange way, though, I think in a way, like for her or my siblings that are still in it, I mean, I've only really been in my life for just over a year. Like from our last conversation, I had just moved to New York, and I'm starting to already notice the way people interact. And maybe over time, people recognize that they can choose another way if they actually want another way. But the thing I also know is, in these situations, you cannot convince somebody to do something different than they want to do. Like you cannot sit somebody down and logic their way through it. It's actually so bananas. I have friends from the Warren Jeff side where they haven't talked to their parents for 7 years because their parents fully believe that they are not only that their kids are not just apostates, but that Warren is still the prophet. Even though he has been convicted as far in, as much as he's been convicted and all this information's out, there are people that still cannot change that worldview. This has been so fascinating for me to just observe in human nature as I've stepped out of this, observing in my own human nature and observing why I believed what I believed and what I believe now. And one thing I've taken from that is you have to let people take steps when they're ready to take steps. You cannot force something. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with my life. I'm just trying to live. Like I'm not doing it. This is a strange thing to say. I'm not doing it for the people there. I'm doing it for me. But the paradox is, by doing it for me, maybe it can show them that there is another way, that there is another path. And so that when they're ready, they end up taking a step. One thing we said off air, I think this would be a good place forward, is like I had somebody that messaged me who's from a cult, and he didn't want to tell me the name of what it was in. He didn't want to tell me his name. He said, "Are you okay?" Now, what he wanted to know, he wasn't looking for my well-being. He grew up very similar to the way I grew up, and he wanted to know, are you okay? Is it okay in the outside world?
Is there life after being in a cult?
Is there life after this? Because he's considering this most difficult decision of leaving everything. Because when you make the decision, you're not just leaving
a club.
Yeah, you're not just leaving a club. You're not just leaving your habits. You're leaving, this is what's hard. The people you love most, the people you respect most, you're leaving them. And in that, there's something that almost feels, at the time, strangely egotistical, because you're like, I'm saying that this is better than what my dad, what my grandfather, what this whole organization, it feels like a big organization when you're in it, is saying is the right way to live. Like, who am I to do that? Like, there's a lot in that, to step into that power.
To say, I know better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And so where I'm coming to with my ex, with other family that's in it, with my kids even, I want to continue to live as truthfully, as sincerely as I can, for me, full stop. And then the comma comes, if they want to see it. If they want to recognize, like this person that called me, is there life outside of it, then perhaps that can give them enough encouragement that, okay, I saw somebody that did it and survived. Maybe I can take that step too.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge point of this podcast too, is to show examples of people who have gone through so much and come out the other side and the ways in which that varies, because it's not always a super happy ending.
That's
Some
right.
people come on and they're like, I wish I had a better ending for you. And I'm like, you know what? This is real. This is honest.
Totally.
And it's great to show people the hardships too, because it's not always a great ending. And we don't want anyone to feel like they're doing it wrong if they're struggling, because it's going to be a struggle for people in different ways, in how it presents itself, how you present yourself to the world, and how people accept you is going to be different for everybody.
That's right.
And so I think it just takes so much time. So let's give people some tangible examples of ways in which you've had a really hard time after leaving, how you were accepted or not accepted by your family.
It took a while. So I think I mentioned this on one of the episodes, and if I didn't, I'll bring it up again. The person I cared about the most, his opinion and stuff like that, was my dad. My dad and I had a huge falling out in 2019 because I showed up to his house dressed like this.
So can you remind me what year you left?
I left 2018.
Okay, so a year later,
officially,
you come to his house.
Yeah, a year and a half later.
And how should you have been dressed?
Well, in fundamentalist Mormonism, you should cover your garments, your Jesus jammies, your long underwear. And so in the LDS church, you guys can actually have t-shirts because the long underwear is right under. Does your audience knows what this is?
The garments. Yeah. Okay. We've talked about it before. The garments you get when you go to the temple and you're endowed, and they go under all of your clothes as your underwear. And it's a t-shirt and like biker shorts. And
it protects you spiritually, physically, and that sort of thing.
That's what they tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I got in a car wreck once and I survived, and I was not even surprised. I rolled my car going 80 miles an hour, and it was wild. But of course I survived. I was wearing the garments. It wasn't until years after I was out that I was looking on my life, I was like, I almost died. What?
Yeah, that you processed it for the first time.
I'm processing it for the first time because in my head I was like, of course God's in charge, and I was wearing the long underwear, so
I'm the chosen.
Yeah, so. I was never in danger.
Right.
Okay, so everybody else in the community that I grew up around, that pretty much got cut off immediately just in the public decision of leaving. Because when I left, I ended up making a video and posting it to Facebook. I wanted to just...
What do you mean? What got cut off?
My connection to them.
Oh,
that relationship to them.
Okay.
That relationship got cut off. And then like the one relationship that really mattered was my dad, and we had a big falling out because I showed up to his house wearing short sleeves. I've talked about this on other podcasts like Anthony Padilla's show. So I don't know if I'm going to go too deeply into it, but there was abuse growing up. There was physical abuse. Like the way that I was raised was very heavy-handed, and that's how my dad's dad thought how kids should be, like disciplined and stuff like that. And I had started doing a lot of therapy after leaving. Thank God for therapy. And I had processed some of those things. And one of the things that my therapist helped me realize is it didn't do me any good to put so much pressure on myself for quote unquote allowing things to be done to me or my siblings. Because when I left, I was like, why did I allow somebody to do that to me? Why did I allow seeing like a sibling get reprimanded that way? Again, through therapy, my therapist helped me realize, look, you were also trying to survive and do what you felt was the right thing.
Yeah.
Like if you were talking to that version of yourself, what would you say? Again, helped me realize that, okay, you're loved, you're not wrong for that. But what I then committed in therapy, she's like, but you don't have to stand for it now. And so I had recently had that therapy session when I was at my dad's, and he lost it.
So you confronted him about this?
Well, I wasn't necessarily confronting him, but I showed up, and then he started coming at me for what I was wearing.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And then I did confront him and essentially said, look, if you want me to leave, I'll leave, but don't talk to me like that. If you have a problem, what's on my body, that's something you got to look into, not me. And so he got up from his chair, threw his drink in my face, like tried to punch me. I blocked him. I pushed and I was like, don't ever touch me ever again.
Yeah.
You've done this with all of us here, and it's not happening anymore. And he kicked me out of his property, said, don't come back. What makes this interesting. Our relationship from that actually eventually got better than it has ever been. As I've post-analyzed it, the only reason I can think of why it got better is because it was honest.
Yeah.
He got to see how I really felt. He told me to never come back, but then a week or two later, he texted me and said, we're having something at the house, you should come. And the way we were raised was if something bad happened, you just forget about it like it never happened and sweep it under the rug. I wasn't ready for that. And so I said, thank you, but I'm not ready. You've done some very hurtful things and have said some hurtful things, and I'm not ready to come.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not have a conversation for over 2 years, maybe 3 years. And we started talking again, but now it was from a place of honesty. And then we found out that he had stage 4 cancer.
Mm.
And once we found that out, then it didn't even, our past just no longer mattered.
Yeah.
And in a strange way, though, like the last 2 years of his life, we got to have a relationship that was grounded in honesty instead of all of this resentment that I had built up over years, because we had already had that exchange. And in a strange way, that exchange to me made those last 2 years way better than conversations I never would have thought I was going to get to have from him. Like him apologizing for things and things of that nature. Like, so the family dynamics has been really interesting since leaving. But to me, I also think the better part has been the relationships that I've gotten to start cultivating outside of it, because I thought I was going to never get to have that, or didn't know if it was ever going to be that close again. And it's now finally coming together, where I'm having really close friendships, really close female friendships and male friendships. Like, super happy for the brothers, the unrelated brothers that are in my life right now that I didn't have for many years outside of it. In a way, I feel like even though I grew up from a big family and I got cut off, I feel like I'm building a new family, not replacing the siblings I have or the connections I still have that are there. But for the first time, I feel like I'm in environments with people that it doesn't matter how I think or how I believe or where I came from, I'm accepted. Yeah. And to me, that's truly what family is anyway.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. I'm glad you've been able to find that community, because I think that's one of the hardest things when people leave is they think, well, where are my people now? Because you also have to figure out what you believe, what you want to stand for, and who you want to gravitate to, which means you have to figure out yourself before you can really jump into anything that feels right, unless you just go from thing to thing to thing, which is also okay if you want to, like, let me try this out, let me try that out. So yeah,
you had mentioned on one of our episodes, like, find your edges. Like, maybe you'll come
find
back.
Your boundaries.
Yeah, you like, exploration is fine. But if I can add some, because the question is going to be like, well, how do I find it? If somebody's out of it, how do I know where to look? This is paradoxical, because there's actually an easy way, quote unquote, at least the easiest way I've found. Just do your thing. Like, go to things and do things that you want to do.
You mean like follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well?
Yes. I don't know if you say it all the time. Literally, yes. So, I mean, shout out to James, shout out to Dan, shout out to Chris, like, shout out to Anthony, like my brothers and my other, like my friend Elaine. Like, I have met some really cool people just doing my thing.
Yeah. Not
going to meetups. I've done that too, but literally following my own curiosities. It could be something as simple as, I like playing basketball, so I'm going to go play basketball. And through basketball, I meat my friend Anthony. Also ended up playing basketball with Adam Sandler in New York City, for heck's sakes. That was wild.
That's fun.
Like, I was a cult kid playing basketball on a farm, and now I'm playing basketball with Adam Sandler. This is insane. Like, that was a crazy experience. And then I'm into, I don't know, I'm doing like cold plunges and saunas. And there's like this group cold plunge and sauna place in New York City. And I'm finding community in that.
Yeah.
And then I'm into YouTube, obviously, and podcasting. So I hang out with creators, and I'm creating community around that. Not everybody's going to live in New York. Not everybody's going to live in Utah or LA. That's fine. But to me, the thing that has helped, and it's almost relieving in a sense, the fastest way is the slow way. Like, it's to not go find those people necessarily. It's to get clear on who you are, or using your words from our last episode, explore your edges. And through doing that, you will find people that also gravitate to those sorts of things. And those who you want to hang out with anyway.
Yeah.
People that are also on that same wavelength that are into those things.
Yeah.
I am so happy for just the people right now in my circle that I feel like have my back. And it's such a simple thing, such simple things. I was at one of my buddies just a few weeks ago. He's a DJ. And I invited a couple friends to this DJ party. But then I had an open mic for stand-up comedy. And so I had to leave to hit the open mic. But when I was leaving, I had two friends like stop me on the way down and says, "We're going with you." And I was like, "Why? You're here for this party." And they're like, "No, we're going to come support you doing your open mic." And that meant so much to me. Just having people, finding people that I did not know a year ago since living in New York are willing to play that role in my life. And it's just getting started. So I just give that for anybody that has stepped out and they're looking for it. Like they're looking for the person, whether it's a relationship or friendship. To me, it's like, who are you? Like, who are you? Like, what are you into? What are your interests? Follow that. Let that lead. And through that, you will start to find people that are also around those same things. At least that's how it's been for me.
I think that's something that we should mention is usually when you're leaving a high control group or religion or a cult, you step out of it like, who would love me now? Because you start with the superiority complex of I'm God's chosen, I'm doing the right thing, those guys aren't, and then you leave and you're like, oh, where does that leave me? And so I think, and I've seen this with so many people, and people who are very successful in their own ways, doing all these things, and then they're like, wait, someone likes me enough to do that for me? And they're honestly surprised. Yeah. And so I just want to shout that out to anyone who may be feeling that way of like, well, who would even love me? There are people who want to meet someone like you and who will appreciate someone like you. Even if you don't feel like that's the case, just like you're saying, be your authentic self and let them come to you and you'll be surprised. There are people who will unconditionally love you. It doesn't matter what you believe or what you wear or where you live, and they will want to be your friend. So you just have to put yourself out there. So before we go into too much more tangents, this is great. We are here to talk about the ups and the downs of leaving. So let's talk about the funeral and how that affected you and kind of you left 6 years ago, and there's still this like push and pull to also bring us down to reality and let people know that it's not always great once you leave.
Yeah, this was challenging. So we knew my dad was dying for 2 years, and since he has passed since we talked, but with the last episode. But in my now higher self, having analyzed leaving a lot and stepping out and looking at what I left, I'll preface it with, this became such a gift to almost validate my decision to leave. Because leaving something isn't always as clear of like, oh, I left, I'm free, I'm happy.
Yeah. Sometimes
you make the right decision and it is still a doubt in your mind. It could be leaving a toxic relationship. Even though, it was bad for you, you're still asking, was it actually a good thing that I left? I had that sort of a thing for a long time when I left the work. I still wondered, like, am I being selfish for wanting to live my life versus what I was told was Christ's way, God's way, my dad's way, my grandfather's way? And going back going back for the funeral and everything just made me realize this was such a clear decision. But one of the things that happened was I was staying at my sister's house in the Salt Lake area because it was getting close. I flew in from New York because my dad was close to passing. He was on hospice at home. I got given a phone call saying, it's close, you're going to want to get here. And again, my dad and I have developed a good relationship in the last 2 years leading up. Had conversations I never thought I was going to get to have. I had a really good conversation with him, like just a sweet little interaction right before he fell asleep and went into some sort of a coma where he was just like, oh, it's Calvin, you made it. And that phrase, my friends and I have talked about it since then, especially coming from Mormonism, was such a fun phrase to hear from your dad. You made it, because you have that fear of sometimes like, am I good enough? And there was just something in that. And he was like, you arrived, you're here. But it was a sweet last interaction. But the thing that was interesting, if I want to use that word, is like, I then get the call that it's closed, so get here. And I speed there. I go in the room where my dad is, and my brothers forced me out. So I wasn't actually there when he passed. At least I was in the house, but not in the room.
Wow.
Because I'm not in it. I don't have the priesthood. There was a lot from this. I've never been more angry in my life than in that moment. And thank God for friends, because it was in that moment that I reached out to some of my, especially male friends, like, what should I do here? I wanted to tear the house down. Like, you're telling me that because you have this thing that you call priesthood, that you're somehow better than me as his son too.
Robbing you of that last interaction.
Yes. And ultimately it became clear that, hey, it's going to be best to not cause a scene, to not end up in jail tonight. And so I left it, and I did feel robbed for a long time, but there's actually a connection to this story that I think is also worth mentioning. Because yes, I could leave it at this and be like, yes, this is crappy that they did this. And I felt that way. I went back home to New York after the funeral, and I couldn't sleep. I was so angry on so many levels. I was angry that they did that. I was angry at the religion to even create the mindset that my brothers younger than me and older than me thought that they were in the right to take that.
Yeah.
I was also deeply angry at myself. I was so mad that I allowed it, that I allowed myself to be, quote unquote, disrespected that way. But I've done a lot of deep digging and therapy. And so I actually got really honest with myself of like, what's really going on here, Calvin? Why does this really bother you? And of course, it bothered me for the obvious reasons. But just under the surface, this is why it really bothered me. Why didn't I stop it? Why didn't I go in there? And here's the hard thing to admit to myself at the time. Because I didn't fully want to. I wanted to be in that room, but not that much. What I wanted the image almost of, yes, I wanted that moment with my dad, but I wanted what I didn't have throughout my entire life with him. I wanted the closeness. I wanted that. And the honest, ugly truth was, we not only had a complicated relationship, it wasn't the deep relationship that kids have with their dad. And that's really where the pain came from. I wanted to, like, if it was somebody like my child or somebody else, there would have been nothing that would have stopped me. I would have been in there. And then I had shame come up with that. Like, what does that mean if I didn't want to really be in there? But then I realized, well, I just didn't have as close a relationship as I wished I could have had. And then that's really where the work of therapy and everything for over the years really had to come into play, to have compassion for that part of myself that wanted to have a close relationship with his dad and just didn't. And so I had to mourn several things. I had to mourn the passing of my dad. But then I had to mourn the possibility of ever having a close physical relationship, like in this physical world, with my dad. And when I was able to get honest with myself for those things, yes, it was very uncomfortable to do, but what it then allowed is now I didn't have to harbor so much resentment for my brothers. Did I think what they did was okay? No. But if I'm being honest with myself, it was actually it was the underneath stuff that really upset me. It wasn't just that I wanted to be in there, yes, but it's because I wanted a close relationship with him. And there was something I was making with that I was like, maybe this is it. maybe this moment I could have it, the last few moments before we pass. And it's just not there. Again, this isn't like back to something you said, it's not a happy ending story necessarily, but it's just me. It's the most honest though. I think it's worth bringing up just because it would have been very easy to just only say, look what the religion does, look what this high control stuff does. And it is, but I think there's this important element in all of these types of conversations of finding your own empowerment in it all. And you cannot feel empowered if you're not starting from a place of honesty.
Yeah.
And that was my honesty of like, for me, the hardest part was like, I wanted to have that close relationship and I didn't. And that's why I really wasn't in there, is I wanted to be in there, but not that much. So it's complicated. It's messy. But clarity though, I don't doubt it anymore. I don't doubt that this is not what I don't want to be around. Like being around that level of control, to think you can do that to somebody that you're supposed to love, that's like your blood sibling.
Yeah.
The control and just the way the funeral happened with the religion and the church leaders, and there was just so much control around it that I'm like, I'm so happy I made the decision to be out of this. And I'm only feeling it now. I can only imagine how much clearer this gets as time goes on. Because at the beginning, there's all this doubt, but that's one of the great gifts that came from it, is that clarity of like, no, that version of you made the right choice. Mm-hmm. And now just continue living this path and leaning into what you feel like is the right thing for you.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I know that's messy.
No, I mean, it's good to share, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and willing to talk about it, because I know it's difficult, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that, and I'm happy for you that you gained some sort of clarity within that whole situation. I think it's so interesting when we leave a situation, just like you said, and it's like, did we do the right thing? And then, like you said, you go back to it and you're like, oh, easy. Because it's a slow process out, even if you physically like jump a wall to get out of a cult, right? You physically take yourself out of the situation, but mentally it's a slow burn.
Totally.
Slow. And you don't even realize how far you've come until go back to it. So same thing with me. I mean,
how long have you been out now?
I left in 2011.
Okay.
So it's been a hot minute.
13.
Yeah, it's wild. So it's funny because I would say maybe 2 to 3 years, I was doing the ping ponging of like, ooh, I hope you made the right choice. I hope you're not going to outer darkness.
You had that too.
That whole thing of like, oh my gosh, what if I was so lucky to actually be born into the right church? And then I turned my back on it. It's so hard.
Did you judge yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, with every tank top I probably put on, I was like, man, am I going to outer darkness?
But you never had coffee, from my understanding. You still haven't come to that.
I still
right?
don't like coffee. Gross.
Oh, you just don't like it.
I don't like the taste.
It's the taste, or you're not saying?
I do not like the taste. And everyone's like, it's not the taste, it's the feeling. I'm like, I'll just stick with my matcha. It's fine.
Okay.
Alcohol, I still haven't. Well, I had 2 drinks on my honeymoon. It was my first drinks ever. And I was like, I'm set. And then I got pregnant and I was like, oh, bummer. It looks like I have to not drink again. So I don't know, maybe one day, guys. But my point is, when I went back to a church, it was for my grandma's funeral, and I sat in there, of course, for the other reasons of like being in front of a family who all thinks I made up my abuse to separate my family, because that's fun, and why else would I do that and come out with my abuse story? Because it's super fun. Yeah. Aside from the obvious of confronting all of that, just being in a Mormon church and singing the Mormon hymns, my whole body had this reaction of like, get me out.
Yes.
I do not want to be here. This does not feel good to me. It felt like I was suffocating. I'm like, oh my gosh, just get me out of this church. Just sing the hymns. Like, I can do that, right? I love to sing. But it was so interesting. And other people, they love it. They love being in church. It makes them feel so good. And I'm like, that's great. But just being able to be honest and recognize within myself that this is absolutely not where I need to be. It's so, it's so empowering and
Uh-huh.
it provides so much clarity, like you said. But my point is with this whole rant is to help people understand that it is a gradual process and you
Yes.
don't realize how much progress you've made until you put yourself
Yes.
back in that situation.
Yes.
Not to say that you should, not to
Yeah.
say that you
Not
should be
not
safe,
yeah,
but
don't
give yourself the
re-traumatize.
grace
Yeah.
and help yourself realize that you have come so far, even if it's just a slight way of thinking, a slight perspective shift that allows you to maybe see people with more compassion, or
Yeah.
a slight perspective shift that helps you not feel so guilty or ashamed with things that you really shouldn't. Those are huge, and give yourself the win.
Mm-hmm. Did it feel, going back, I'm just curious, did it feel almost fake? Like that was my feeling for some reason. I was wondering,
Like a big show.
yeah,
Yeah.
it felt so artificial to me, and it was strange. And I'm trying to. I mean, you're right. There are some people that still get so much from that, but from my experience going back, it felt fake. And if there's a through line in all this, I think it's in something of what you said, and it's what you're really doing is you're getting better and better at listening to who you are, what resonates with you, and you're leaning into that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a leaning. It's not always just jumping in. Like leaving can feel like a jumping into, you're jumping into the unknown, but it still feels gradual. And you don't realize how much progress you've made in living authentically until you go back to something that was just your normal. And you're like, whoa. And to me, that whoa is recognizing the growth that you've made in leaning into your authenticity. Because that's what we're doing at the end of the day. It's like, what can I do that's more myself, that feels more authentic, and saying no to the BS and saying yes to the things that feel like, yes, this is something I actually want to be around. These are the types of people I want to be hanging out with. This is the type of life I want to lead, and not shaming yourself for that authenticity.
Well, and that's what it is. It's the authenticity of you that allows you to live your best life. And that's what we talk about. Not every person on here has the same consciousness side of the story. Some people still feel a lot of comfort being Christian. Some people are like hardcore atheists, and that's fine because that's what makes them feel comfortable, and that's what they resonate with. And so I think it's just that honesty of being so in tune with yourself. That's the awareness that we talk about, the consciousness, the being awake to your body, your mind, your soul. What are they trying to tell you about whatever situation that you're in feels like? Because once you really start to pay attention to your body and notice that shift of like, oh, I'm a little bit uncomfortable here, I don't really know why I shouldn't be uncomfortable, and then we talk ourselves down, follow those gut feelings, because something in you doesn't resonate with what's going on.
Something I've said to some of my friends: trust your discontent. Trust your discontent. If there's something that feels off, trust that. Find out why that feels off.
Yes, and recognizing, though, that it may not feel off for everybody. It may just be a you thing, and that's okay. It's okay to go a different direction, even if everybody in that church is like crying with the Spirit. You know, maybe they're loving it.
Yeah,
but if something doesn't feel right,
but the thing is when you're that person, though, you're looking around and being like,
am I crazy?
Am I crazy? Yeah. Is it just me? Like, am I just like, because I'm supposed to have this spiritual awakening, this experience. And if I'm being honest with myself, I don't think I have had this thing that they're describing. And you question it and you almost judge yourself for it. But it's such a strange thing, like just zooming out, because you have to be, it's like a humility and an ego thing at the same time, because it's not really ego, but it just almost like you're elevating your own experience over anybody else, which, hello, yes, we are like, this is a huge revelation for me as an ex-Mormon, that is valid. You get to have your own experience that is different from somebody else. But then there's just a humility and like, I'm gonna be honest to myself that I'm not experiencing this. This is not what I'm not having this same feeling.
Sorry, Oscar's chasing squirrels in his dreams. It's okay.
That's hilarious.
It's okay. Get the squirrels.
Yeah, it is so interesting though how that we do that we look around and we're like, I don't think this way, I don't feel that way, and then we judge ourselves for it. And so it's just a practice in trusting what you're actually experiencing.
Yeah, which is just to get to the point that you can become aware is a process. Getting to the point where you can flip on your intuition, because every high control group, I don't care which one it is, their goal is to shut that off.
That's right.
They don't want you to have thoughts outside of what they're telling you to think. They don't want you to
Totally.
come up with answers that are not in their handbook.
Yes.
You have to conform. And so turning on your intuition is the first step to even becoming aware, to even becoming...
Which is so bold.
Yes.
Especially when you're told, like what I was told is like, if you have a thought different from your leaders or your books, then it's probably the devil.
Yes.
And so you start to think that your intuition is the devil.
Yep. And that's how they
so
do it.
mind-blowing.
That's the only way that they can get you to stop listening to yourself, is
Yeah.
if they literally demonize it
Yeah.
and make you think, because that's terrifying. There are a few things more terrifying than thinking that an actual demon is in your brain, tempting
Yes.
you to have thoughts.
I don't know if I said this on the other 2 episodes, but that was the most terrifying thing. I did not feel safe in myself.
Yeah.
I did not feel safe in myself when I started questioning, when I was doubting for the first time. Like, I have so much love, compassion, respect for someone that starts to question their environment. It could be, again, anything, to your point. It can be a control group of any kind, religious, politically, a family environment, a work environment, where if you're like, I actually don't resonate with those things, it's so ballsy. Because you literally, especially if you're being told, if you have something that is different from this, if you're not conforming, you're so wrong. Like, you're not safe to even vocalize that. It's brave to then stand up and say, actually, I'm going to be honest, I don't resonate with that. And that could mean being outcasted. It could mean, in our case, like losing your soul. It's a big deal. I'm so happy that, I mean, just even with the show, that you have to like focus on those people that are willing to do that, because it's hard. It's so hard. And it's not even religious all the time. It could be literally a relationship that you don't belong in anymore. You know, like, I've seen that. I've had comments of people saying, I didn't grow up in a cult, but for some reason, hearing you talk gave me the courage to leave a toxic relationship. And I'm like, thank God for you. Like, because that's so difficult, especially if you've been in it for years and it's all you've known, and who's going to love me if I leave, and like really prioritizing your own lived experience of what resonates and what doesn't, what's authentic and what's not. It's strange to say, but one of the scariest thing when you're in a high control group, one of the scariest thing to do is to be authentic. One of the scariest thing to do is to be yourself.
Yeah.
The good news is that starts to flip over time, where you start to be happier, rewarded in life for that authenticity.
Yeah. And you become unapologetically yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what is so threatening to people who are still in it. Because they look at
That's
you
right.
and they're like, oh my gosh, why does Calvin have to be so extra about it? He has a whole YouTube channel. Like, why can't you just leave it alone, Calvin?
Exactly.
Because your authenticity threatens their simplicity. And it makes them feel like, well, he can't just go out there and wear short sleeves. Like, who does he think he is?
Who does he think he is? Okay, these are just comments, like, because it was a clip either from your show or somebody else's show that showed up somewhere on social media, and somebody from the community is like, when the scriptures talks about selling your soul, this is exactly what it looks like. Like, talking about me, you know, like, just mean comments too. Like, if you follow him long enough, you'll find nothing original. He just puts out very obnoxious content, and he's just a victim in everything from his childhood, and then portrays the religion in such a falsified way. Like, yeah, there's all these things. Like, you're going to get shade because it's threatening to
It's threatening to their salvation. Because, Calvin, if you're even a little bit right, that threatens their salvation in their minds. Because if you say anything that even resonates a little bit with them, then they're like, wait, is there truth to that? What if all of it's a sham? What if I've wasted my entire life following this thing that isn't real, and I'm not going to be in heaven with my family?
Yeah, that's very scary. And so, in a way, I get it. Like, the philosophical conversation, I don't know if we're going to solve it in this podcast, but something I've given a lot of thought to is like, where is our, like mine, yours, people that have been through that, where is our, what's the ethical line with exposing falsehood to people deeply in it.
Yeah.
Because knowing how hard it is, as we're just talking about it, it's so hard to rip that blindfold off and to recognize all of this is probably a sham. And yes, option A, Joseph Smith is like a prophet that has done so many good things and everybody's against them. Option B, he was lying to people about gold, and so he probably lied about, the scriptures, and there's no physical evidence of that. He's probably a con man, and we're all probably born, those of us that are from Mormonism, from a con man's lies. Like, that's, if you've believed your whole life that this guy is like next to Jesus, and then you hear that, no, he's a con man, again, where is our line of ethics? Like, do we tell those people? And do we go wake them up? Do we? The only thing I've found, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is just like, do my thing, share my lived experience. If people wants to search it and find it, they'll find it. If they don't, if they're not ready for it, they're welcome to block or unsubscribe.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. Living by example, showing that there is happiness outside of these groups is a way to make them question. It's enough to make them go, I was told that if you left the religion, you would get into drugs and die.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
Literally that simple.
Yeah.
Or they've toned it down recently, and it's more like, well, they may look happy, but they don't know true happiness. But when guys, look at me. I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
Have they seen your baby yet?
I don't know. The channel, have they seen my baby?
Yeah, has the channel seen your baby?
We did a live. We did a live, and so you guys can go see our little one. She's perfect.
Yeah.
Of course, there's going to be ups and downs, but just living by example, showing people, hey, there's life after this.
Yes.
And I'm doing great, and I'm thriving even more.
Yes.
And just coming into myself and all of that. Okay, going back to the ethics.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking you about your daughter, because where's the line where, as a parent, that
I do not want her being married in an arranged way
with other sister wives. Like, that's not what you want for her. I'm not going to say it's wrong, because, people have their opinions, but it's not what you want for her. And so where do you put your foot down and be like, sorry, my love, I'm not going to let you go that direction?
This is it for me. She's going to know that she has power. Mm-hmm. She's going to know that she gets to make choices that are hers, that are different from mom, dad, or people around her. And I think that's what's happening in the last few years with them getting to be in different environments. They already know the world's a much bigger place than just, like, I didn't know that. Like, it was the craziest experience for me to live in Utah and then live in Southern California. Yeah. Because I would talk to people and there's like, what's your religion? And I say Mormon. Like, some people said, oh, what's that? Oh, that building on the side of the freeway. I was like, it was my whole world. Everybody knew about it. But when you're just in the bubble, you don't realize how tiny it is. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to do with my kids is, she's going to decide. Okay. She's going to realize that she...
But Calvin, thought experiment, because you brought up ethics. Okay. What are you going to do if she says, Dad, I've thought about it and I want to be a plural wife?
Okay.
You're going to say, yeah, go for it?
I have had this... Well, I wouldn't just say okay right away. I'd say talk me through it. Okay. And I want to make sure that it is actually coming from something that she feels, and I'll question it. I'll throw doubt on it. But who am I to, and this is a hard conversation because she's 7, but let's imagine she's 27. Who am I to tell my 27-year-old daughter, no?
Okay, so who are we to tell people who still believe in Joseph Smith the prophet, not the con man? Who are we to say, hey, grown man, grown woman, you're in a cult.
That's my question.
But here we are at Cults to Consciousness
And that's
channel.
What I'm saying. It's like the best we can do is if somebody's right here listening to you, listen to me in this conversation, they must be curious. The only thing I keep coming down to is this. I don't think any living human being has a monopoly on what is real and what is true. But there is one thing that we actually have a monopoly on and nobody gets to say otherwise. And it's your own lived experience, your own honesty. If there's an ethic to anything, to me, it's like conveying, not convincing. Conveying, not convincing. Conveying is, to me, is like, this is how I saw it when I looked at the data.
Yeah.
This is what I'm concluding to when I'm looking at everything. And just being as clear as you can on your own experience, because the truth is, if I'm trying to convince my daughter or my son or anybody, I'm kind of living by the same game that I was under. That's the way I'm viewing it.
Yeah.
And so that's not to say that you can't expose bullshit where you see it and all these false prophets like John Timpson of My Religion and other, like, of course, Warren Jeffs and others. But to me, the foundation of it, the assumption, the base is the important part, where I'm not necessarily trying to get somebody to do something differently. You kind of want that as a byproduct, perhaps. But what I'm really trying to do is just convey as clearly and as honestly as possible my own experience, and then let them choose.
Yes. And that's exactly what this channel is, because that's the conclusion we came to. I'm not here to be like, this is an ex-Mormon channel and these are all the reasons you shouldn't be Mormon. What you can't argue with is someone's lived experience.
That's right.
This was their experience with Mormonism. This was their experience with being Amish. This was their experience with Mennonites and Scientology, and name the groups we've covered here. Because we want to show people that one experience does not define everybody else's, just as all the good experiences don't change someone's bad experience. So we're not saying your good experience didn't happen or doesn't happen or doesn't exist. And also, we want you to recognize that the bad ones do. And that's what we're doing, is trying to call out the negative things through these experiences, through people who come on and tell their stories, because we want you to go, oh, this is also a possibility, and I'm going to be more aware of that if you continue to choose to be in that group. So I think that's the ethics of it. 100%. We're not trying to bring people out or put people in or tell people what to do. We're trying to show examples of things that were less than great. Of course, like, this is not a faith-promoting channel. I'll be 100% honest about that. We're not trying to tell you to, or we're not trying to show all the happy, positive things, because there are plenty of channels to do that. We're trying to show the underbelly, the side that people don't talk about, so that it can become exposed.
Shows like Cults to Consciousness is so important, because the way we were raised in our respective different religions is these types of stories are never public.
Yeah.
If somebody has a bad experience,
PR shuts it down real quick.
Yeah, PR shuts it down. Maybe whisper it to your bishop once and never bring it up again.
Yeah.
It's never talked about. And that's why it's really important to be like, yo, no, all these supposedly good things are creating a lot of harm. And that if it's real, it's somebody's lived experience, it gets to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So here we are. Let's do your Linda Listen.
My Linda Listen for this episode is escape the script.
Oh.
Like, I think that's what it really comes down to. No matter if you're Mormon, if you're Catholic, if you're atheist, if you're, I don't know, you were born in one political party, now you're in another one, we're all given some script of the way you're supposed to live your life. And I think the only way you're ultimately going to be happy is through authenticity. So you have to escape the script somehow, some way.
Yeah.
You get to make your own story. And that is something that I've come to in the last few years that at first felt terrifying. And it's just been through a lot of work, a lot of self-reflection to realize, no, this is the one thing I get to have. Like everybody in this life, we get to choose the life that we want. We get to write our story.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't get to write the beginning of the story often, but we're holding the pen now if you're aware enough to hold the pen. So escape the script, escape what somebody told you should do, whether it's a parent, an institution, a political, escape it and live your life.
Yeah.
Make your own story. You get to make your story.
Yeah. And the best part about that is you can pull chapters from other scripts that you enjoyed.
Exactly.
And
make
cobble together your own story. You don't have
totally
to completely just, rip it up and throw it away. You can pull things that still resonate and leave the rest. Take what resonates, leave the rest. So that's great. I love it. This has been awesome. Thanks for
So
stopping
cool
by.
to be here. Yeah, thanks for sharing the 70 degrees with me.
Yeah. So everyone, make sure to go and follow Calvin's channel at official Calvin Wayman on YouTube.
Yes.
And Instagram, YouTube that you want to plug? Or YouTube, Instagram, TikTok?
Calvin Wayman on Instagram. Of course, doing Cultured, the podcast, which on officialcalvinwayman.com is where I do the podcast. That's been super fun. Life through the eyes of an ex-cult member.
All right.
Over on Cultured. So yeah, it's been really fun to do that. So yeah, would love to hear people say hi. Tell me what you thought about this episode, or if there's other things you want to hear more of, let us know in the comments, because I'll come back here and check out these comments too. If there's something that we didn't quite cover or you have an opinion on, I might cover that on my channel. So
well, this has been a fun philosophical conversation for me. So thanks for letting me play a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for playing.
Okay, so guys, thank you so much for watching and supporting. Definitely leave those comments down below, thoughts, opinions. We love your words of encouragement for our guests as well. Liking, sharing, all the YouTube things. You guys know you're amazing. Love our community. And if you want to support further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/cults2consciousness. And we have some merch. Sorry for what I said when I was in a cult. All those things, Apostates Unite. We're going to be updating that soon. In fact, we just had on
You have a cult merch?
Yeah.
I'm wearing this. But
that's right. I saw halfway through that it says, let's start a cult. I was like, what is this shirt?
I need to, this isn't mine, but it's an inspiration. I want to create more merch eventually because celebrate our heathenism.
We just had on a former cult leader, first time ever. And I was like, I need to make you a t-shirt that said, I'm sorry for what I said when I was a cult leader.
That's amazing.
So maybe that's coming. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Make sure to go check out Calvin's previous interviews. We'll link them in the description, and we'll probably put them in the end screens here. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.